Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Lindsay Miller. She is a mindfulness coach, kids mindfulness coach, mindfulness educator, and host of the Stress Nanny podcast. Welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about mindfulness for families, practical tools. We'll learn all that from you. But before we come to this, let's talk a bit about your journey so that people know who they are listening to.
Thank you. Yeah, so I had started out learning about psychology during a class in high school, and was enamored with it. I loved it. I started to understand how the brain works, different parts of the brain, and it really opened my eyes to why people do what they do. So fast forward a couple of years, and I was navigating some struggles of my own where I was having a lot of anxiety. I was having a hard time in a lot of areas of my life. In school, I was in college at the time. So in school, in my personal life, and I needed some tools to help me through. And I wasn't getting what I needed just from the psychology. I had been studying a lot of psychology, and it just wasn't enough. And I was able to connect with a practitioner, actually from India, and she was able to teach me mindfulness as part of my journey. And I was so excited to find it because there were so many parts of it that felt simple but powerful at the same time. And so once I included the mindfulness in my healing and my growth, I had such a big change that I recognized that there was nothing else I wanted to learn more about than this. So I dove into mindfulness in so many different ways. Became certified. I started teaching it to adult women and started helping them overcome some of the same hurdles that I faced. And at the time, I realized there were so many things that I wish I had known when I was younger, especially when it came to mindfulness and psychology. And so I was wondering, what would it be like if kids had these tools? If kids could use like the best of psychology and the best of mindfulness and bring it together and have those tools while they're growing up, what change would it make? So I started teaching, and then it caught on, and I had more and more people come and more people ask for support for their kids. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. And I realized just how powerful it was for helping kids understand how to manage stress and work through difficult situations while also building emotional intelligence so that they could pursue their goals, grow in ways that they wanted to grow, and have strong relationships. And so that's how I came to teaching mindfulness to kids.
Wonderful, wonderful, Lindsay. Now, to understand mindfulness from, from the perspective of kids, how should kids understand mindfulness? We understand as adults, we understand mindfulness differently. You are a kids mindfulness coach, a mindfulness educator. Help us understand how should kids understand it? How should parents help the kids understand about mindfulness?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And so, one of the ways I explain it when I'm talking to kids is that mindfulness is knowing what's going on inside of you, knowing what's going on outside of you, and making a choice on purpose. So, at its core, that's presence, right? When we're talking about being mindful and just fully present in our circumstances, that's what we're doing. We're noticing what's going on inside of us, knowing what's going on outside of us, and then making a choice on purpose. So when we talk to kids about it in that way, they can connect and understand, like, okay, I'm feeling angry. I'm also tired. My mom is asking me to go do my chores. I'm frustrated and I don't want to. All those things are creating a scenario where I want to yell at her, hit something, go storm off. And I help kids recognize how they're feeling, how to let those feelings move through them, and then make that choice on purpose. So just this morning, I was on a call with some kids and we talked about being flexible. So like when we can notice and acknowledge all those feelings, they don't get in the way of our response. We can let them be there, be like, yeah, I'm so frustrated at my mom right now, and I'm still going to choose to do what she's asking me to do because I know it's going to open up choices for me later in the day. So it sounds simple, but really, like when kids can learn to process those things pretty quickly, it opens up so many things for them because they're not as reactive. They're not like creating a scenario where they're just lashing out at somebody or just responding without thinking. They're able to process and then respond in a more proactive rather than reactive way.
Right, right, Lindsay. Now let's look at it again from kids' perspective. When we talk about mindfulness, we also if I understand correctly, it's about being in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are so not being in the moment is adults' problem. Kids are generally in the moment; they are enjoying that moment.
Yeah.
How do we fix something that's not broken? Because we are telling them about stress, we are telling them about not being in the moment when they are already in that moment. So aren't we, how do you manage that thin balance when we are trying to push something which is more in the domain of adults into kids domain? Means that can be a very delicate, very difficult thing to calibrate, because more can be a little too much and less will not be impactful. How do you do it?
Yeah, it's such a good question. That's one of the best questions I've ever gotten. So, the way that I look at it is that they only need it when they need it, right? Like you're saying, most of the time, kids are really enthusiastically involved in the moment that they're in. But when they find themselves in a space of discomfort, it's often around the emotion that they're feeling, an outcome that didn't go their way. And a lot of times kids are getting stuck in this cycle where they're responding in a same way to a situation and it's just not working. Right? And so those are the moments when we introduce mindfulness. Like when we see a pattern that's lasting for months at a time, and the child is having this hurdle, and maybe their anger is getting in the way of them making friends, or maybe their anger is getting in the way of them connecting with a sibling, or maybe their anxiety or nervousness is getting in the way of them trying something new that they're really interested in. Then that's when we bring it in, right? And we're like, okay, there's this tool you can use to help you move through it, instead of, yeah, like you're saying, for everyday situations they already are mindful in so many ways. But if they're facing a consistent pattern that's getting in the way of them doing something they want to do, that's when we generally introduce it and say, hey, try this, see if it helps. And a lot of times, what I see is, especially with kids who worry a lot, have really pretty big imaginations and tend to
Right.
think about things that maybe aren't going to happen. When we can teach them, hey, like let's guide your imagination to the place where it's going to support you instead of getting your way. Those are the places where mindfulness can be really powerful. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does. But how should then parents use this mindfulness? They are closest to the kids, but kids are also growing at that point in certain places. Kids see parents as almost adversaries in certain situations. So, how do parents get into the kids zone and inject that mindfulness in the right doses and does not look like adversaries, but as somebody who are there to support, not to create hurdles in their in their thought process, the way they want to see the world.
Yeah, again, an awesome question. One of the things I really like to do is use stories. So, when I was first introduced to mindfulness, I was introduced to the idea of the thought river. And the idea being that we all have this river in our heads where our thoughts are just kind of floating down the river. And a lot of times we're in the river, kind of like drowning amidst our thoughts without realizing that there's actually this rock on the side of the river where we can sit
Right.
and just kind of watch them go by. You familiar with that one?
Right.
And so when I like to use stories like that, because they don't have to be this big heavy teaching moment, cuz like you're saying, if we're seen as an adversary as a parent, and the kids aren't interested in learning from us, those conversations don't go as well. But if we can make it a little more lighthearted and playful and use story to teach kids how to leverage the tools of mindfulness, then we put ourselves in a situation where we can make a comment like, is that something that just needs to float down your thought river? Or is that something like, are you kind of drowning in your thoughts right now? And those stories, because we've used the stories, they carry weight. That's different, right? So we don't have to lecture. We can reference the story if we've established it in our family culture. And then that story does the teaching for us.
Absolutely. Story does the teaching for us. So, uh, do parents need to first create that story for themselves? If they are teaching kids about mindfulness and they themselves are not walking that talk, then how will it work? So what is the message here for parents? Do they need to first get mindfulness ready, do it themselves, and then preach the kids about that particular thing? How does that work?
Definitely, 100%. I always say that, kids have a big barometer, like, they have a big recognition of someone who's teaching something who doesn't actually practice, right? Or who doesn't actually
Right.
understand. They understand when we're trying to share something with them in a disingenuous way. And so I am always a big fan of parents doing the work to understand their own triggers, like, understand when they get, emotionally involved in a situation and be able to kind of take a step back, process their emotions. The same thing, right? Notice what's going on inside, notice what's going on outside, make a choice on purpose. So, like, I'm feeling frustrated because I've had a long day. I'm tired. I didn't get much sleep. And my kid is asking me for this for the 15th time. And I really just need them to do what I asked. Right. So, noticing that tendency and then saying, like, my child is also, sick right now, or has been having trouble at school, or doesn't feel connected to a sibling and is feeling kind of lonely. And that's why they're asking me to play again with them. And so when we can do that, we can respond more compassionately. And it's not to say we do exactly what we're being asked by the child at that time, right? But we can respond in a way that helps them feel seen and heard, which often is the thing that they're looking for anyway. And so when we've done our own work and we're not as reactive, like, stop asking me that, I can't handle it anymore, or you just need to go away for a while. Like, those responses aren't helping any of us connect or helping anyone regulate, right? Like, regulate their nervous system. But if we can pause, understand what's at the core of the interaction, then move forward intentionally, we'll create a scenario where more and more of those moments can happen. And with those intentional responses from us, our children will start to learn and see how to create those intentional responses for themselves as well.
Right, right, Lindsay. Now, kids have a lot of questions. And when you tell them that, listen, I want to talk to you about mindfulness, they will also ask, okay, tell me how will it benefit me? What do you tell them in terms of mindfulness, how it will benefit them?
Yes, yeah, you know kids so well. So, yeah, definitely they want to know why to buy in, right? Like, why is this important? Always, always, always for kids, I explain it in a way that helps them understand how it will help them reach their goals. So, for kids who are having trouble connecting socially, we talk about how mindfulness can help them, create a scenario where they can connect with more people, make friends. If somebody is having trouble with schoolwork and maybe their parents are getting frustrated with them because they're not able to understand, maybe they're feeling like they don't know enough, that they're not going to be successful. Those are situations where we say, okay, this is the scenario you're in right now. Maybe you're lonely. Maybe you're worried about this task. I had one boy that I worked with at the very beginning, and he really wanted to take a hip hop dance class. He was worried about what his friends would think. He wasn't really interested in a lot of other activities. He tried them, but he really wanted to do dance. But he was concerned about what the other kids would think. So we talked about how mindfulness can help him process that, right? Understand what's going on inside of him. Understand he really wanted to do the class, and this is something he was feeling drawn to and excited about. Understand that his reticence, or his, like, the hurdle wasn't actually anything for him. His parents were supportive. He was excited. It was his worries about perception from other people. So then we could make a conscious choice once we understood those things. Like, is this something you want to do? Yeah, it's something I want to do. Okay, how will you process people's responses? What will you say? So use mindfulness to talk that through. So again, like, his investment in mindfulness was in pursuit of his goals, right? The reason that he wanted to do it, the reason he thought it was interesting, is it because it could help him get where he wanted to go. And he hadn't found something that could help him get where he wanted to go just yet. So when we can frame it to kids in a way that they see it as a tool, like, this is the thing that can help you get better grades or do better, in your friendships, they have a different investment in it because they understand the connection between where they are now, where they want to go, and how mindfulness can help them get there.
Right, right, Lindsay. Now, kids want to learn everything in a fun way. They have that great imagination and they look at. But when they first hear the word mindfulness, it sounds very, you know, something big related to meditation and all that. How do you bring that fun part into something called mindfulness? Is it easy? It is tough.
For me, it's easy, but I've been practicing it for a while, and I think that's one of the things about my method that is unique, is that we do always approach it in a playful way. I have a group class that I teach, and it's called Mindfulness Club, and each week we do a different activity together and talk about how to apply mindfulness. So I try to keep it lighthearted because, like you mentioned earlier, I want kids to associate mindfulness with like a good feeling. I don't want it
Right.
ever to feel like a drag or something boring because I want it to be a tool they use for the rest of their lives. I don't want them to be turned off from it when they're little, right? So I
Right.
like to use fun props and activities to help illustrate some of the concepts. So, as you and I know, when we can approach life with a more mindful attitude, a more mindful perspective, we have more flexibility for like what comes at us day to day. We can respond on purpose to like interruptions or things that don't go our way. So, when I'm talking about mindfulness and those kind of qualities with kids, I'll use like toys or activities, crafts that help
Right.
us understand the concept in a more concrete way, since mindfulness is kind of an abstract topic. So this morning I was on a call with some kids and we were talking about how to be flexible. And I had sent them
Yeah.
some of these little stretchy noodles, and we talked about like how flexible are you when your mom asks you to go do something at bedtime, go brush your teeth and get ready for bed, and you don't want to because you were watching a movie. How flexible are you? And they like stretch it to how flexible they are. Like, okay, how flexible could you be if you just like noticed your frustration and chose differently? And so we can use different activities to help them make these abstract concepts concrete and playful at the same time. And that's one of the ways that I think it's crucial for teaching kids because it invites them. Like, nobody's going to tell me no if I get this out and say, like, let's talk about how to be flexible, right?
Right.
Another thing I like to do is like with a worry balloon. So I'll send like 5 balloons and the kids will look. I send mail every week to the kids that I coach, and then we do the activity based on what I sent. So with the 5 balloons, I'll say, okay, you're worried about this upcoming school year. Pick a color to represent your worry, because again, from neuroscience, that kind of specificity helps the brain organize the emotion. So we say pick a color to represent the worry and then blow the balloon up however big your worry is. Again, logic and emotion connecting. So they blow up the balloon to represent the worry. Like, okay, what specifically are you worried about? And one little girl that I was speaking with, she was saying, I have to sit by someone I don't know on the bus. And I'm nervous because I'm little and I don't, she was just in first grade and she doesn't know them. So, okay, that is a big worry. So what can we do with the worry? We can ask for help. We can let it go. We can hold on to it. We can move through it. And so we talked about how to move through that worry and what she could do with the worry. And at the end of the day, like in a situation like that, there's not a kid on this earth who doesn't like let go of the balloon, right? And it's like
Right.
flying all over the place and just crazy. So they want to let go of the balloon. I taught that activity in a soccer team one time, and I had them play soccer hanging onto the balloon. So they didn't tie it off. They just had to run around like holding on to their balloons about not performing well. And they're like, can we let these go? And I was like, I don't know. Can you? Are you ready to let them go? They're like, yes, we can't play holding on to these. I was like, yeah, it's hard to play your best when you're holding on to a bunch of worries, right? Like, let's let them go. So when we can make it fun like that, it invites them. I love like Montessori's teachings around that, where we make the activity inviting and the kids are drawn to it.
Wonderful. There is so much to learn from you, and this is, just one podcast episode. You are the host of another, your own podcast, the Stress Nanny podcast. Tell us a bit about your podcast so that people can learn so much from your podcast itself.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I host the Stress Nanny podcast where I share tips and tools like the ones that I just shared here today with your awesome audience. And then I also have interviews with experts in the field of child development, family science, where we talk about different ways to uplevel family life and create a scenario where mindfulness can be part of your family culture and really help you create the kind of family that you're hoping to have, where everybody knows what's going on inside of them, what's going on outside of them, and can make a choice on purpose about how they want to be together and how they want to grow.
Wonderful. And as I said, people want to learn so much from you. So, what is the best way for them to learn more about you, from you, about your podcast, and be your client if possible?
Yeah, thank you. Welcome to my podcast is available on any podcast platform. Also, you can visit my website, thestressnanny.com, and there's information about my coaching on there, and I'm working on an online course. It should launch this fall. So families can it's called Mindfulness Together. So families can work together through the different stories and decide which stories are best for them and which ones they want to use, and then use those simple stories to make mindfulness a part of their world.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.